I'm Andrew Henderson. This is another Nomad Capitalist interview. This is the channel for 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs who want to legally go where they're treated best, reducing their taxes overseas, having second passports, looking for new opportunities. And it's all here in the best-selling Amazon book, Nomad Capitalist. Really excited today to be joined by Roger Ver, who is one of the most prominent people in the cryptocurrency industry, founder of Bitcoin.com, the proclaimed Bitcoin Jesus. Where did they come up with that? Who first came up with that, Roger?
Yeah.
Bitcoin Jesus.
Somebody else came up with that name. I definitely did not choose that name myself, but I think Bitcoin Johnny Appleseed probably would have been a bit more appropriate because I was busy spreading Bitcoin adoption all over the world for over a decade now, actually. So in the very beginning of 2011, I got started and basically funded all the original Bitcoin startup businesses and was telling anybody I could get to listen to me about Bitcoin and how this was going to change everything in the world. And somewhere along the line, people started calling me Bitcoin Jesus. But things didn't turn out too well for the original Jesus, so I hope to meet a better fate.
You did not invent Bitcoin Jesus. That was somebody else.
Yeah, I absolutely did not choose that name for myself. I think it actually started, there was a barbecue. And I was telling a bunch of high school kids about Bitcoin and setting them up with wallets and sending them some. And young people, digital currencies don't seem so wild or crazy for them. And so they were all just enthralled and said, "Yeah, this is great. I can't wait to use this." And one of the other adults, who was probably in their 40s or 50s, looked at me surrounded by 24 high school kids, and he said, "Roger, it's like you're a Bitcoin Jesus, and you have all your disciples around you." And so I think that was the original origin there. But I definitely did not choose that nickname for myself.
Helping people to multiply the loaves and the fishes, as it were, I suppose. Hopefully some of those people went on to take your advice, I hope.
Yeah, quite. In fact, I just had somebody text me the other day and said, "Thank you." I gave them a whole Bitcoin back in 2011 when it was just worth, a couple bucks each. And they said they still held on to it and they have it all. And they were very appreciative of that. So that's done very well for them over the last few years.
10 years ago, what motivated you to get into Bitcoin? What did you see back when almost no one was talking about this?
Well, I've studied a whole bunch of economics as a young man, and the more economics you study, the more you realize that anytime government interferes in people trying to trade with each other, they're preventing both people from being better off. And so the more barriers to trade we can tear down in the world, the better off the entire world is going to be. And I'm living in this world with everybody else. And so then when I heard about Bitcoin, I realized I heard about it in reference to the Silk Road. I've only been a spectator on darknet markets. I've never been a participant, but I found it incredibly interesting that they were able to use this to buy and sell things without permission. And anytime anybody can buy and sell things without permission, so long as it's a peaceful thing where things aren't counterfeit or stolen or something like that, it's a good thing for everybody involved. And so I became very, very interested in the type of money that they were using for that sort of thing. And because I had a background in economics and a background in computer science, I could understand technically how Bitcoin worked, and I could understand, economically how this is literally going to change the way the entire world works. Because now any human being anywhere on the planet can send or receive any amount of money with any other human being anywhere on the planet, and there's nothing that anybody can do to stop them. And that was an incredibly powerful, exciting thing for me. And I knew I had to get involved full time in that because it was literally one of the most important inventions in all of human history. You have the wheel, electricity, the internet, and then probably the invention of the Bitcoin is right up there in terms of importance for all of human history. It's truly one of the most important inventions ever.
By the way, Roger is going to be at Nomad Capitalist Live in Mexico, so we'll obviously be talking about this a lot more there and a lot of his experiences, and you can meet him. But I know you wanted to talk about where you think some of the more mainstream adopters of cryptocurrency are perhaps mistaken. We'll get to that in a moment. You mentioned Silk Road. One of the things people talk about is growing adoption of cryptocurrency. How do you square that with this idea that certainly the government pushes, and I argue people, a lot of them listen to the government, that this is something that is Silk Road, it is nefarious. How do you square that when people are still saying it's good for this, voluntary interaction? Most people don't want that.
If you look at it, there's more than 100,000 websites that now accept cryptocurrencies for payments. There's people all over the world using it to buy and sell non-illegal things, just normal things. In fact, I'm going to be going to another Caribbean island here shortly. I just booked my villa that I rented there in Bitcoin Cash. I booked the rental car in Bitcoin Cash. I paid for everything in Bitcoin Cash. None of that's illegal. None of that was tax evasion stuff. It was all just normal old, regular old commerce. And in fact, here in Antigua, where I'm recording this, you can spend Bitcoin Cash at just about every single restaurant here. None of that's illegal. None of that's crazy stuff. It's just normal people going about their normal lives. And any tool that can make it easier for normal people to go about their normal lives, that's a good thing. And if you look at it around the world, the currency that's used for the most illegal things and the most horrible things around the world, it's the US dollar, by far. It's not, second place isn't even close. So if you really want to complain about people using currencies for illegal things, you should be concerned about the US dollar.
Is Antigua, so you're in the Caribbean island of Antigua. You've been there for a while, as I understand. Is this greater crypto adoption because you're there and convincing people to get on board? Why is it catching on?
I absolutely played a role in it, but there's a lot of other people helping me. We have super active Bitcoin Cash meetups here. Just about every restaurant's accepting it. You have a bunch of other businesses accepting it. You can even pay for your citizenship here in Bitcoin Cash. I'm sure Nomad Capitalist can help you with that as well. I know Andrew accepts cryptocurrencies for all of his services as well. But it's really starting to catch on here in a big way, and it's fun to see it because we were starting with such an easy starting point. It's only a country of a little under 100,000 people. And when you have a country that small, you can really change things quickly and do big things. I'm literally more restaurants than not accepted at this point. You can literally buy, I've been buying the gas at the normal old gas station in Bitcoin Cash when I fill up the gas tank of my car here. It's really, really amazing how quickly it's catching on and just how much awareness there is across it for the entire country. In fact, out of the blue, as I was driving around in my own car yesterday, I saw a taxi here who had a Bitcoin Cash sticker. It's a Bitcoin Cash accepted here on the back of his taxi. It was amazing. I wasn't expecting to see that. I was just driving around and there it was. So it's really amazing. But if you've dealt with the banks here, you can understand why people are so eager to have an alternative. Dealing with the banks here is definitely a challenge. And in most places in the world, the banks only seem to be getting more and more difficult to deal with, whereas cryptocurrencies are getting easier and easier to deal with.
A lot of the banks in Antigua, though, and a lot of these offshore banks have been pushed by the same jurisdictions now that are pushing back on crypto. That's part of why they've become so difficult. They've always been an island time, but I think more difficult because the US, the EU have said, even though when they were sovereign countries back in the late 70s, early 80s, hey, offshore banking, that's how you should make your money and support yourself. Now they're against it, and now they're basically trying to shut it down. So what's interesting to me is, I've always thought these smaller countries can turn on a dime. You're from the United States. What do you see in terms of crypto in the United States in the mainstream? Is it easier to convince people in Antigua?
It's definitely easier to convince people in Antigua just because they're their own nation here. And one of the biggest industries in Antigua previously was online gaming. All these online poker websites and different gaming websites, a huge amount of them were based here in Antigua. And everything was going great, and there was lots of jobs in the country, and people were making money. And then the US government had their big giant clampdown on online gaming. And that really disrupted the entire country of Antigua and disrupted the economy here. And the country of Antigua literally sued the United States in the World Court that the US government set up. The US government lost, and the US government still refused to pay, I think it's in the tens of millions or maybe hundreds of millions of US dollars worth now that's owed to Antigua, and they still haven't paid them for that. But they understand the way the US government cut off all the online gaming was by blocking the payments. But now that we have an uncensorable payment network in the form of cryptocurrency, all these local people here are potentially looking at that. Oh, maybe there's going to be a revival of the online gaming industry, and it can be based here in Antigua again, thanks to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin Cash, not thanks to the banks, because they're all under the thumb of the US and the Europeans basically control and dictate to them what they can and can't do.
And to a certain extent, the citizenship as well. Fortunately, in a sense, Antigua was the last country to lose access to Canada. Perhaps a blessing in disguise that now they don't have to kowtow to the US or to Canada. They do have to perhaps somewhat to Europe or to the UK. Do you think, as you travel around the Caribbean, I know you're a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Do you think people there feel oppressed, perhaps is too strong of a word, by all these external forces, and that's why they're looking at crypto as an opportunity to make a living, basically?
Oppressed is a bit of a strong word. I don't know how much you can say that you're oppressed by the state of nature, but for anybody that's read Ludwig von Mises, you'll remember him talking about in Human Action that man is in a constant state of uneasiness. and you're always looking for, how you can improve your position and your circumstance in the world. And so that's anytime you see something, whether it's a piece of food or a chair to sit in or money that you can zip around the world without needing permission from anybody to send or receive it, that's improving your position in the world and your ability to navigate through life and feel happier as you go through it. So anytime people come across anything like that, it's going to be attractive to them. And anybody who's waited in line at a bank or pulled their hair out from trying to deal with a bank, when they see how easy it is to permissionlessly set up a cryptocurrency wallet and then send and receive payments with somebody all over the world, where you literally don't even have to give your name to do it, that's a really, really big improvement in somebody's life. And so people are going to be attracted to that. But one thing I can say is that the people here in Antigua are a bit more open-minded than some of their neighboring islands here in the Caribbean. They're much more willing to talk to strangers and try new things, and it's been really, really fantastic to see the Bitcoin Cash meetups we've had here. Some of them, I think, close to 100 people have shown up to, and that's a lot for a country that's this small. It would be a huge meetup if we got 100 people to show up at the meetup in Tokyo, where we have a metropolitan area of 35 million people. Right here in little old Antigua with 100,000 people, we're having similar sized meetups than we have in Tokyo. So it's really, really impressive to see just how much open-mindedness there are from the Antiguans here.
And why do you think that is versus the other islands or versus other countries?
Well, I think part of it also is maybe the coronavirus lockdowns around the world have really decimated the economies here and around the world. And so when you're having a really hard time with your traditional business and the government's locking everything down or telling you you're not allowed to open or whatever, you're going to be a lot more receptive to new ways to do things.
As people become more receptive, you see more institutional money getting in, you see big people getting into this. I know you've had some differing thoughts from some of the big players that are getting into the Bitcoin space around the utility of this. What are some of the areas where you push back on some of the newer money into crypto?
Yeah, I think a lot of the newer money into crypto, they're more interested in it being a non-correlated asset, which is fine. But the reason it became a non-correlated asset to begin with at all is that it was permissionless peer-to-peer cash. So some of the newer money into crypto, they only seem interested in it as a non-correlated asset. But I think they're misunderstanding the reason it became a non-correlated asset at all is because it worked as peer-to-peer electronic cash for the world, where you could send or receive any amount of money with anyone, anywhere, instantly, basically for free. And the frustrating part for me is that Bitcoin no longer behaves that way. The average fees as we're recording this to make a Bitcoin transaction are somewhere in the ballpark of $12 per transaction. That's too much, right? And so we heard the person that inspired me to reach out to you and ask to do this was Michael Saylor recently was talking about how all these different businesses are going to build beautiful user interfaces for people to use cryptocurrency, and it's going to be much faster and easier than a blockchain. But the point I think he missed there is that if you don't have the ability to have self-custody of your cryptocurrency, you're right back where we were with watching every platform from PayPal to GoFundMe to even YouTube now shutting down people's platforms or shutting down people's ability to use the platform. Whereas if you have a cryptocurrency like a Bitcoin Cash or like any currency that has low enough fees for people to be able to transact in directly without needing a PayPal, without needing a Square, without needing a Cash App to hold the custody of the funds for them, you're in a whole new world there. You're in a whole new league where you truly have peer-to-peer electronic cash. And if you study economics, you'll see the reason gold became a store of value is because it had other use cases, right? It's been used in dentistry for thousands of years. It's been used in electronics. It's been used in all sorts of things. In America, everybody uses the dollar as their store of value. But the reason they use the dollar is because they can spend it anywhere. In Europe, everyone uses the euro as a store of value because you can spend the euro anywhere. If you weren't able to spend the dollar anywhere or everywhere, and if you weren't able to spend the euro everywhere, people wouldn't use them as stores of value. And so I see it the same way with cryptocurrencies. They need to be spendable everywhere in order for them to be usable as a store of value. If you destroy its usefulness in actual commerce, what do you have left? You just have a speculative asset where you're going to have speculators speculating on the future speculation of other speculators. That's not a long-term sustainable game that I would want to be involved in there. Whereas if you can have it where people can have complete control of their own money and even literally send Bitcoin Cash over a YouTube video, the first person to scan each one of these QR codes gets $5 in Bitcoin Cash. It literally goes from this piece of paper through the camera to your phone. If you scan this with the Bitcoin.com wallet app or any other app that can scan a private key, you'll literally get the free money from this. Each one has $5 on it. You can't do that with Bitcoin any longer because of the intentional high fees. It would have cost $10 to load each one of these squares, and then to claim each $5 square, you'd have to pay $10 in fees. It's not doable at all. So it's basically become a network where you have to trust custodians to handle it for you. But as we're seeing all over the world now on every major social media platform and everything else, people are being deplatformed. And if you're being deplatformed, it's not censorship-resistant peer-to-peer cash for the world, which is what made cryptocurrencies popular to begin with. And so I think it's really, really important to understand that that's the characteristic that made Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general attractive to people all over the world, that gave it a price and then had it shoot up to this wild price. And so today, everybody's buying the brand they know, and the brand they know is Bitcoin. But the user experience that made Bitcoin popular no longer exists on Bitcoin. The user experience that made Bitcoin popular to begin with is on things like Bitcoin Cash and Monero and Zcash and a bunch of other ones out there. Bitcoin's just this brand, but it doesn't have the actual characteristics that made Bitcoin popular to begin with. And that's, I guess, where I take issue with some of these other newer entrants to the cryptocurrency space, is that if it's not usable as cash, it's not going to be usable as a store of value long term.
So let me play the devil's advocate. I talk about the United States, where you and I are from, as a legacy brand. Other countries, well-known countries, are legacy brands. You could argue, I think you and I would, America no longer lives in the United States. It's a concept that is now other places. It takes a long time for people to adapt to the idea that the brand they thought was what it was isn't the brand. And so how do you communicate that, and how do you think that plays out in terms of Bitcoin Cash, which you promote, for example, versus the name brand?
Yeah, I think we're already seeing it with America. So many of the best and the brightest entrepreneurs either already have left, are actively leaving, or are actively considering leaving. And I think at some point, you're right, maybe people will figure out that America, the brand, isn't the same America that made America great to begin with. And America literally overthrew the existing government over a 0.25% tax on tea. And now, individual states, California has more than 10% income tax on top of the federal income tax there too. So America isn't the America that was born and became this bastion of economic freedom around the world any longer. And Bitcoin isn't the peer-to-peer electronic cash that made it popular to begin with either. But how long will it take for people to figure that out? I don't know, but I'm doing my best to help get the word out. And I think once people figure it out, all you have to do to figure it out, try making a Bitcoin transaction, try sending and receiving some with somebody, and you realize, wait a minute, this doesn't work. And in fact, so I set up the first major e-commerce website to accept Bitcoin in the entire world. It was called BitcoinStar.com back in 2012. And we were accepting Bitcoin for payments for more than 500,000 consumer electronics products. And the thing that really made me jump ship from Bitcoin is in around, I think, 2017, it became absolutely unusable for payments. You were paying thousands of dollars in fees for a single Bitcoin transaction. Granted, I was moving around tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars worth at a time, but nobody wants to pay thousands of dollars in fees for a single transaction. And then not only that, but the transaction would take hours or days, or sometimes would get stuck and not go through at all. Bitcoin became absolutely unusable for commerce. And if it's unusable for commercial payments, well, why would I store my value in that? So I switched eventually to promoting Bitcoin Cash because I think it's the best tool to bring the most economic freedom to the most number of people around the world. And if you can bring more economic freedom to the world, the rate of economic growth increases, everybody's standard of living increases, and as a side effect, everybody that's early to it will make a bunch of money, just like everybody that was early to Bitcoin does too. So it's a win-win situation. You get to bring more economic freedom to the world, and you get to benefit personally as well. It's a fantastic tool to bring more economic freedom to the world, and this is the world that I'm living in, and so I want to make it the best world I possibly can because I plan to be in it for a while longer.
What do you say then to the Michael Saylors or to so many other people who say this is an asset that, like uber wealthy families, people are going to hold on to for generations, for centuries? I don't want to spend it. And people would say, if you're going out and buying a DVD player back in 2012 or whatever people were buying back in 2012 with Bitcoin, that was stupid. What do you say to those folks? Are they elitists because they're not focusing on people in Antigua, for example, who just want to sell stuff at their restaurant?
Well, I think they're also missing the point that there's a time preference there too. Like I just bought the newest iPhone a month back or so. I'm sure for that exact same amount of money, in a year from now, I'll be able to buy a much, much, much better iPhone, but people want it right now. And so I think the same is true with the cryptocurrencies, right? If you just hold it and you never, ever, ever do anything with it, well, there's no actual use case, right? Like this iPhone is a lot more useful to me than a rock, because I can do all sorts of things with the iPhone that I can't do with a rock. The same is true with cryptocurrencies that actually work for payments. They're a lot more useful than cryptocurrencies that don't work for payments. And so with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, for example, they're both equally scarce. They both have 21 million coins. There's never going to be more than that. But one of them actually works for payments around the world. You can buy your gasoline, you can buy your food, you can go shopping, you can spend it at more than 100,000 websites, and the fee per transaction is a fraction of a penny. With Bitcoin, the transaction fee is going to be 10, 20, sometimes 50 or even $1,000, and you have no idea how long it's going to take your transaction to go through. It's very, very clear that one of those is more useful in commerce and therefore more useful to more people around the world. I invite Michael Saylor, hey, Mike, go and make a Bitcoin transaction and then make a Bitcoin Cash transaction, and it will be clear to you. But I think most of these people, probably including Michael Saylor, I think in fact, I sent him $1 of Bitcoin Cash, and I sent him $99 of Bitcoin Cash via Twitter direct message. I don't think he ever saw my message, but it was sitting there in his Twitter inbox. You can't do that with Bitcoin. I sent those to him on chain. The $1 is completely impossible to send anybody worth of Bitcoin. The $99 is impractical to send via Bitcoin because it would cost you $10 to send it, and the person who got it would then cost $10 the next time they want to send it, and it's just like an ice cube that melts in your hand. So you can't use ice cubes as money because it'll melt. Well, Bitcoin is like ice cubes melting every time you try and send it, and I think he's never used it. It would be my guess. And there was another guy I was talking to recently. He had bought more than $100 million of Bitcoin with his own money. And I asked him, I said, have you ever made a Bitcoin transaction on chain? And he had to think about it, and he wasn't sure if he had. He thinks he might have maybe one time. And so I sent him some Bitcoin. I sent him $5 worth of Bitcoin Cash, not because it's any amount of money that matters to him. The guy has at least $100 million. But I sent him $5 in Bitcoin Cash to point out to him that you can't send somebody $5 in Bitcoin. And so for the vast majority of the world, $5 is enough money that it's an average size purchase of something. If you can't do it with Bitcoin, but you can do it with Bitcoin Cash, that makes Bitcoin Cash a lot more attractive. So if you have two cryptocurrencies, both equally scarce, but one actually works for payments, it seems very clear to me which one's going to be more popular in the long run. And I invite everybody to go and give these a try for yourself, and then use whichever one seems more useful to you in your own life.
When did you make the switch?
When I saw the fees hitting $1,000 on Bitcoin, and then I saw the final chance at Bitcoin being able to scale to be money for the world, which was this thing called the SegWit 2x agreement. And the idea was to do this one thing called SegWit, and then to also increase the block size on Bitcoin from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes. And I think this was, I don't know, back in 2017 or 18 now, it's been a while. And when the 2 megabyte part of that basically was abandoned, which would have doubled Bitcoin's throughput capacity. Right now it can do 3.5 transactions per second, so it would have been able to do 6 or 7 transactions per second after that. And a bunch of people that I think have no business sense and weren't successful entrepreneurs before argued against that. And when they successfully scuttled that upgrade to Bitcoin, it was clear that Bitcoin could never scale to become permissionless peer-to-peer cash for the world. It would never become this giant tool to bring more economic freedom to the world. So I looked at all the other cryptocurrencies out there. I looked at the Ethereums and the Ripples and this and that, and there's thousands of them now. And I looked at all of them and I thought, okay, every single person in the world that held Bitcoin on August 1st, I think it was, of 2017, now has Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. It's accepted widely around the world. And basically I looked at all the characteristics there, and it looked to me back then, and it still does, Bitcoin Cash is the cryptocurrency that has the best chance at bringing the most economic freedom to the most number of people around the world. And when I say economic freedom, I mean the ability to transact economically with other people around the world without needing permission from politicians or bureaucrats or regulators, and not needing permission from some custodian to send your money, not having to give your name or your email address or your tax ID number to anybody. It just works, and it works for any person anywhere on the planet. And to me, that's so exciting. And when the 2x part of the upgrade plan for Bitcoin died, to me that was the day Bitcoin died as money for the world. And so I wanted to promote something that I thought had a chance to bring more economic freedom to the world. And today that's Bitcoin Cash. But if next week I thought it was some other cryptocurrency, I'd be out there, ringing the bell for that other cryptocurrency as well. Because the goal isn't The goal isn't for Bitcoin Cash to become money for the world. The goal is to build the tools that enable every single human being on the planet to be able to transact with every other human being on the planet and not need permission from some other human being that has nothing to do with their transaction. And that's what I'm trying to build with Bitcoin.com, and that's what I'm trying to build with Bitcoin Cash. And I think every nomad capitalist can appreciate the ability to being able to transact with other people and not need permission from some other person, and to be able to do it privately as well. And we're busy building that right into the Bitcoin.com wallet too.
Is this the difference between your background? You've been an entrepreneur pretty much for your entire life, as I have, right? 19, 20 years old, I think. You had a lot of different things. You had memory dealers. You were selling stuff on eBay. Is this the difference, perhaps, between an entrepreneur who's looking at transactions? I just did a Bitcoin transaction recently, and yeah, it cost about $700-800. Is this the difference between that person and the investor? I think that they are different personality types. Is Bitcoin Cash, in your opinion, more of the entrepreneurial mindset?
Bitcoin Cash definitely is the libertarian entrepreneurial mindset. I think Bitcoin is more the software engineer developer mindset, and they let the good enough problem be the enemy of the perfect solution. Or they think if the solution isn't perfect, well, we're not going to go with this good enough solution anyhow, and so they'd rather do nothing at all, which then caused a disaster. And I remember seeing that happen with a number of these software developer types. They just didn't care that there was going to be an absolute disaster. And the entrepreneurial mindset, it really drove me nuts. I heard one of them saying, well, if we just increase the block size, it'll let all the businesses using Bitcoin just relax. And I was like, of course that's what we want. We want every single user of Bitcoin around the world to be able to just relax and have it just work and not have to worry about anything, so that we can be busy attracting new users to Bitcoin. And instead, he wanted all the existing users to have to go and jump through a bunch of hoops and do all sorts of stuff and upgrade this and change that just to be able to continue using Bitcoin. And for me, as a business owner for a long, long time, you want to make everything as easy as you possibly can for your customer so that it goes as smooth as it possibly can. You want to make it as easy for them to pay you and as easy for everything to go, and you make sure you gently remind them, here's your invoice, here's my bank details, here's how you can pay. If you want to pay me this way, that's fine. You want to make everything as easy as you possibly can. You don't just email them the tracking number. You email them the tracking number and right below it and say, and here's the link you can click on to see the FedEx page with your tracking number so you know when your product's going to get there. You do absolutely anything and everything you can to make the user experience for your customer as easy as you possibly can. And I'm sad to say that with the Bitcoin software engineers and the Bitcoin core developers did the exact opposite. They did everything they could to make it as difficult for businesses to start using Bitcoin. And lo and behold, the person that got designated with the name Bitcoin Jesus moved on to something else that provided a better user experience for more people around the world. And that's what you'll get with any business. If you make it difficult for your customers to use your product, they're going to find a different product and they're going to start using that as well. So in economics theory, it's called substitute goods theory. If Coca-Cola becomes really expensive or hard to get, more people are going to start drinking Pepsi. And if Coca-Cola and Pepsi both become difficult, more people are going to start drinking, 7-Up or root beer or iced tea or whatever else out there. And the same is true with cryptocurrencies.
They'll still never drink RC Cola, though. That'll be the one they'll never, no matter what you do, you can force them to sell that stuff. You're saying frictionless, like Amazon, one click, it comes.
Yeah, and that's how Bitcoin used to work. It used to be an amazing, magical experience where the transactions most of the time were completely free. If there was any fee, it was so small you didn't really have to pay attention. And the transactions were instant and basically irreversible. And instead of that, they've now changed it to slow, expensive, reversible transactions that are a big pain in the butt to use. Well, surprise, surprise, Bitcoin's market share of cryptocurrencies went from basically 100% down to 50-something%.
And so for the people who are still in Bitcoin, obviously they've done very well recently. Most cryptos have done very well recently. What do you say to the folks who are getting into Bitcoin, who have done well and say, why don't I stick with this? It is the brand. Just the same way I would invest in real estate in the United States and not in Antigua, not in Georgia.
It's fine. They have done very fine investing, and that's a good thing. The more people that make more money in Bitcoin, that's a great thing. I want to see people successful all over the world. But at this point, I feel like Bitcoin is more a game of musical chairs with people getting in and buying in. And their hope, if you listen to them, they buy it with dollars now. Their hope is that they'll be able to sell it for more dollars later on. That's not a long-term sustainable strategy. And then their other hope is that maybe they'll be able to figure out the technological platform to make Bitcoin usable for payments. And as Michael Saylor and others have been talking about, oh, you'll have all these custodial platforms where people are able to use them custodially. Well, I think you've lost the vast, vast majority of the attractive part about them if you're having to use a custodian. Yeah, it's a bit better than the dollar because they can't print as many as they want at any time. But we've already seen it happen with Bitcoin. We've had fractional reserve platforms where everybody thinks they have one number of Bitcoin in the platform, but it turned out the platform had been hacked, people had lost Bitcoins, and it turns out you don't get them all back. So anytime you have to use a custodian to hold your Bitcoin, you're at their mercy. And there will be lots and lots of custodians, but we want people to have the option to be able to hold the cryptocurrency themselves. And if you take away the option of people being able to hold the cryptocurrency themselves, you open up the door for all sorts of shenanigans where you can have fractional reserve stuff and hackings. And for custodians as well, the more cryptocurrency that's being held by a custodian, the bigger a target it becomes for hackers. Whereas if you have 1 billion people around the world all holding, $1,000 of crypto, you have 1 billion different potential targets for hackers. If you have PayPal or Cash App or whoever holding $100 billion worth of crypto, you have one single giant target that they're going to be after, and that's much, much more dangerous to cryptocurrency in general when you have these giant centralized institutions that are acting as custodians for everybody. And I'm not opposed to custodians in general. You just have to have the ability to be able to do self-custodianship where you hold the funds yourselves.
What are the countries that you think are most crypto-friendly right now? Which countries are being versatile and saying, let's bring these new opportunities in?
Antigua, without a doubt, is one of the ones towards the top of the list. There's really a huge amount of adoption and welcomeness from the government to cryptocurrencies in general and Bitcoin Cash specifically. If the world wasn't locked down with Corona travel restrictions here, Antigua would be it would probably be the top cryptocurrency vacation destination. You can literally pay for just about everything here. So when vacations are allowed again, I invite everybody to come here and give things a try. But Singapore has also been doing a fantastic job of welcoming this sort of entrepreneurship and cryptocurrency adoption. Japan has been surprisingly welcoming as well, although as someone who's lived in Japan for a long time and speaks fluent Japanese, I can tell you a big part of the reason why this adoption's been happening in Japan is that all the Japanese bureaucrats, they know that Bitcoin was created by Satoshi Nakamoto, obviously a Japanese person, and they have a lot of nationalistic pride where they want the entire world to know what a wonderful thing was created by this Satoshi Nakamoto person. And even in like 2012, I think it was the Japanese central bank, or I'd have to check my email exchange, but they reached out to me wanting to meet with Satoshi directly because they wanted to talk to him in Japanese about Bitcoin, and they didn't understand that Satoshi was just some anonymous name that somebody was using. But around the world, we're seeing a lot. But a big change that we've seen in the US that I think is a problem. In the early days, everybody knew Bitcoin was money. And then the IRS came out with a ruling that no, Bitcoin is property, and we're going to treat it like property, and it's going to be subject to capital gains tax and this and that. I think that was a disaster for Bitcoin adoption. Bitcoin was supposed to be money from day one. And I'm working on getting it ruled to be the official money of a particular country. And if that's the case, it'll really open the door for investors in the US and Europe and all over the place to be able to invest in it just like doing any other Forex trade. And it'll help get rid of a lot of the capital gains tax requirements for Bitcoin Cash specifically.
What country do you think might do that?
No comment at the moment. I'm working on it. So.
You'll stay in suspense. You left the U.S. when? When did you physically leave?
So I physically left the U.S. in 2006. And then I started the renunciation process. Well, the first step to renounce is you have to get citizenship somewhere else. And so I looked into that in 2006, but it was expensive and it would have been a big chunk of my net worth at that point. And then it wasn't until Bitcoin came along and I said, okay, that's enough for me. I haven't lived in the US at that point, it had been 6 or 7 years. And so I started on getting a second citizenship, and then the actual renunciation happened on February 4th of 2014, one of the happiest days of my life.
Do you celebrate February 4th? It's coming up here. Do you celebrate February 4th every year?
I definitely will this year. I think actually, I kid you not, it was actually one of the happiest days of my entire life. I just felt so liberated and free, and finally, I'm saying both, and special thanks to St. Kitts for giving me a citizenship there. What a wonderful, wonderful opportunity it was for me, and I'm sure I've been good for them as well. But the idea of St. Kitts, it literally, they have no personal income tax, they have no personal capital gains tax. I don't even have to file a form at the end of the year. And even though I've been gone from the US for well over a decade, I'm still having to file forms in the US, but it's just such a wonderful feeling knowing that I don't even have to file a form in St. Kitts, or Antigua for that matter. Really, really wonderful. And so America claims to be the land of the free. Well, you better look to Antigua or St. Kitts for that. You literally don't even have to file a form at the end of the year. They have no idea how much money you made or what you did. That's the real land of the free. America's just the brand that people know, but there's plenty of freer countries in the world at this point.
At least Estonia, it's on a postcard, basically. Everyone talks about copying Estonia, but they can't get anything done because they're such a big country. What is your suggestion if you are a U.S. citizen and you are into crypto, whether it's Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, whatever it may be? What do you tell those people they should do?
I think it's the same thing you've been telling people for years, Andrew. Go where you are treated best. And I see a lot of these Americans moving to Puerto Rico because they think that they're going to have a tax break. Well, I don't trust the government. You think that they're not going to change the rules of the game midway through the game on you? They do it all the time, right? They outlawed gold ownership before, and they seized everybody's gold. They do all sorts of crazy stuff. So if you think you're going to move to Puerto Rico and not have to pay capital gains tax on your crypto holdings, I wish you good luck. I hope you're right, but man, I think you're in for a bad time there, especially if cryptocurrency continues to get more and more traction around the world. I welcome you to Antigua. I welcome you to St. Kitts. I welcome you to anywhere in the world where you think you're going to be treated better than the U.S. And at this point, there's plenty of choices around the world.
Probably most places. And we'll talk more about this, in Mexico at the conference. But I imagine a lot of people who they take the Puerto Rico option, whether they're in your space or in my space, there's this comfort of, but I still have the U.S. citizenship. It's a baby step. They feel like they're not giving something up. Is that maybe the way what you see people doing it?
I think people feel that way, and people are scared that, oh, what if I can never go back to the U.S. ever again? And there's a whole other story. You can watch some other YouTubes about it, but I'm literally a convicted violent felon in the United States, right? Long story short, I sold firecrackers on eBay as a teenager, but I'm considered a violent felon in the US. They gave me a 10-year multiple entry visa to be able to go to the US anytime I want. I can spend multiple months there per year with no tax liability whatsoever. So if they gave me, a violent felon in the United States, a 10-year multiple entry visa for the US, just about anybody is going to be able to get a visa to go to the U.S. So I don't think you have to be worried about not being able to visit the U.S. ever again.
The first time they told you couldn't go, though.
Well, they did give me a little bit of a hard time when I applied at the embassy in Barbados. Yeah. And I brought all the paperwork with me showing my ties outside of the U.S., big stack. And they physically refused to allow me to slide them through the window for them to look at. And then they basically said, nah, we didn't see your evidence. So because we haven't seen your evidence, we're going to deny your visa. So when I went and applied at the embassy in Japan, which had been home base for a while there, on the very first try, they approved my visa there. And then I've renewed it a couple of times since then. So my advice is maybe don't apply for your visa in Barbados. Apply for in whatever country you're spending the majority of your time at that point.
Yeah, they want you to go to your country of citizenship or I suppose residence, and so Japan can be somewhat weird in terms of what is your residence status there. They're probably in a lot better mood because they're not really rejecting too many Japanese people in Tokyo.
I think that, and then also
Japanese just go.
Japanese culture is very by the book, by the letter of everything, and by the letter of the law. I have very clearly qualified for the visa. And so whereas in the Caribbean, maybe things are a bit, faster and looser and lazier and, do the absolute minimum, which is not how things are in Japan. So I think the letter of the law helped me in Japan in that case.
Are you saying if you're a U.S. citizen and you have substantial crypto holdings that everyone should just renounce?
No, it depends on you. If you plan to live in the U.S. for the rest of your life, then you got to deal with that, right? It's a trade-off. Do you want to pay half your income, every year in the U.S.? Then stay in the U.S. Go ahead and do it. If you're already not living in the U.S. and you don't plan to move back there, and in my case, I knew I was never going to live in the U.S. again. I was pretty mad about the way I'd been treated in the legal system there, which is a whole other story. But since I knew I was never moving back there again, there was zero benefit for me to continuing to hold a U.S. passport. And if you're not living in the U.S.,
some of these new crypto guys,
I would advise you to renounce if you're not planning to live in the U.S. ever again.
A lot of what people tell me on social media, though, is, but of course you're missing the point of cryptocurrency. I mean, who knows you have it? And I say, well, look at the new Form 1040. Do you have cryptocurrency? I don't want to I don't want to be a guy, committing perjury. I don't know about you or anyone else. I imagine you don't. But what do you say to those people?
As someone who spent time in federal prison, right? I did 10 months in federal prison. My advice to you is not to go there. You do not want to go there. It is not worth it. If you were a billionaire, you would pay $1 billion not to go to federal prison, right? The money isn't worth it. The risk is not worth it. Philosophically, you can make all sorts of arguments that taxation is theft or whatever else. Whether you buy into them or not, that's a whole other story. It's not worth it. Don't mess around with these people. These are violent people that will toss you in a cage, and they don't care about you. They don't care about your family. They don't care about your business. They'll gladly destroy your entire life to get you. Don't mess with these people. Do whatever it is that they're threatening you that you have to do. And the best thing is to just remove yourself from their purview altogether and get out of their hair and get out of their life. And like I said, that was the happiest day of my entire life when I felt like I was no longer in their purview, when I renounced my U.S. citizenship. And if you're not living in the U.S., do it again. And I've watched a lot of your videos, Andrew. I think we have similar worldviews there. But you're not going to change the politicians' minds. You're not going to do anything. You just have to navigate the world that you're living in. And yeah, maybe the taxation's unfair. Maybe it's all this stuff. But it's still the world you live in, and you still might wind up in a real prison. Don't mess with that stuff. Just avoid it and find. There's a great book by Harry Brown, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. It's a fantastic book. Pick it up, and it's a great point of view changing book that'll help you see the world a bit more clear, that you can still find freedom in an unfree world. And that's what I think each of us should be doing without risking going to prison at the same time.
That's a whole other topic, right? People who have the worldview of they've studied the U.S., Australia, and Canada, and they say there's nowhere to go. You and I are pretty libertarian, but perhaps a little bit different than some of the folks who are even more extreme, where there is a pragmatism and there is a, why do you want to be somewhere where you're so unwelcome? Why do you want to potentially get into trouble? And I think my thought on this increasingly is the government isn't as dumb as a lot of libertarians want to think. They just don't care. When it comes to taxing people, you look at some of the most inefficient countries in the world, they're a gem when it comes to taxing you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when you start messing with the money, they're going to be Johnny on the spot to make sure it keeps coming. And it's dangerous stuff to mess with it. And I think that's part of why Satoshi Nakamoto decided to remain this anonymous figure. But for me as a libertarian, when I saw cryptocurrency as this amazing tool to bring more economic freedom to the world, I knew it was dangerous to speak out in favor of it, but it was just too exciting and too attractive to continue to be quiet, which is what I had done. After I got out of prison, I was still a libertarian, but I didn't talk to anybody about anything. I kept my mouth shut and my head low and just wanted to go about my life until Bitcoin came along, because it was basically kryptonite to the state and it became too exciting. But luckily, I'm in a jurisdiction where there aren't any direct taxes like that. There's a sales tax here and an import duty, but there's no capital gains tax or income tax here, so I don't have to worry about those same sort of things any longer.
Lastly, what I wanted to ask you, the other thing that I hear is you've obtained citizenship by investment, $150,000. I think it was more when you did it, but now it's $150,000 in St. Kitts. There are other options like Antigua, St. Lucia, which I've done, and I'm looking at some others. People who are holding crypto, that's their entire net worth, they say, tell them, it's 2.7 Bitcoin today to become citizen of XYZ. And they'll say, well, in a year, it'll be 1 or it'll be half. So I'll just wait. And to me, that sounds like a never ending, let me just push it off and let me find freedom later. What do you say to that, based on your iPhone analogy?
Yeah, the longer you wait, the harder it's going to be probably legally. And then on your iPhone analogy, well, yeah, but you want it now, right? You don't want to wait another decade. But here's the investment strategy advice here. Don't sell your crypto to buy this citizenship. Go and borrow against it, right? And then you can write off the interest payments as a tax deduction probably, and go and get your local U.S. CPA tax advice on this. But borrow against your crypto. Use the borrowed money to pay for the citizenship somewhere else, and then renounce. And then your net worth is not any higher. You didn't have to sell your crypto. You still get the advantage of the gains there. That's probably the smart way to do it. But go and seek your. Probably the Nomad Capitalist is probably a good place to get some help with that sort of thing. But that would be the strategy I would use if I were still an American.
Or as we've seen in the last year, they make it very difficult to renounce. Oh, we have COVID. Sorry, can't help you. Go away. Come back when the whole thing blows over.
Yeah, I have a good friend that just tried to renounce recently, And they denied his, and actually as a story from my own renunciation, when I went into the embassy, the guy that's, job is to read me the form there, he asked me, do you want to pay with cash, credit card, or Bitcoin? And I looked at him and I said, how do you know I would be interested in paying with Bitcoin? He goes, oh, we know all about you.
They know everything.
And he did,
Oh,
he really did. And
Where did you do it?
This was in Barbados. And I told him, I said, well, can I really pay in Bitcoin? And he says, no, I was just kidding. So at least he had a sense of humor a bit. But then he went through these different things he had to caution me about and whatnot. And the part that really caught my attention there is that he said that you're not telling them that you're renouncing, you're asking for their permission to stop being an American. I said, well, do you guys ever deny the request? He goes, oh yeah, it happens all the time. And that seemed really strange to me. How could they possibly deny somebody telling them, hey, I'm stopping being an American, thank you very much. But apparently they claim the right to tell you, no, you have to continue being an American. And in fact, that just happened to a friend of mine. He went in and he had the renunciation interview and he went through all of that, and where they caution you, oh, you're not going to be able to collect Social Security anymore, but they don't tell you the fact that you're not going to have to pay Social Security taxes anymore.
Well, that's too, right?
But
I still get my statements. I'm getting $1,100 a month in 2079 or something. I can't wait.
Good luck with that. Yeah. But a friend of mine recently had his renunciation request denied. And that was really shocking to both of us there. And the reason they gave is that, oh, it sounded like you weren't sure enough that you actually wanted to renounce or some nonsense like that. The guy was definitely sure about it. And now he's going to have to fight with him again and try and renounce again. But they're only making it more and more difficult, more and more expensive, more and more burdensome. So my advice to you is do it sooner rather than later if you want to do it. But the first step is get a second citizenship. If you don't have that already, that's the first step to ever renouncing. So if you're even considering renouncing, get a second citizenship first. And Andrew and your team, fantastic place, I assume, to do it. I haven't used you directly, but I love the content you put out there. And I've been involved in this space pretty deeply myself for a while. Andrew and his team definitely seem to know what they're talking about. And
we've had a couple of your friends, actually. They've been really nice, but that we've been doing it for. But I think it's going to be more than the U.S. in the future, and I've been really happy in quotes to hear some attorneys around the world who are in this space agreeing with me and saying you're going to see other countries going the way of the U.S. I can't say that I've heard too many people being rejected. That does seem pretty rare. Rejected to even go in, not rare, but it'll be interesting to see what other countries do this. Roger Ver, where can we find you? Bitcoin.com. Yeah,
Bitcoin.com. If you want to read a little bit more about me and my prison experience and that sort of stuff, RogerVer.com. And then I have Roger K. Ver on Twitter if you want to follow me there. But the best thing that you can do for me, though, too, go and try and give cryptocurrencies a try. Go and receive some, send it with a friend. The Bitcoin.com wallet's a fantastic place to start. But the goal here is to empower every individual on the planet to have complete control over their own money. So if you're a fan of the Nomad Capitalist, well, you need some Nomad Capitalistic money, and that's cryptocurrency. And go and give them a try for yourself, and it'll really make your life better off because of it.
Do you go back to Japan still?
I was going to. There's a little bit of a coronavirus lockdown story there. My Japanese visa expired, and long story short is I don't have a visa for Japan at the moment, and they're restricting all foreigners from going there at the moment. So I'm in the Caribbean for the moment. We'll see what happens.
We should work on another passport and get you into Japan. I've had people who've called and asked that. They said, that's the one thing I want. I want visa-free access to Japan. And that's, as you can attest, not the easiest thing to get with some of these passports. Anyway, Roger, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. And subscribe, and share Andrew's content so you can help more people in the world become aware of this.
How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.